Lonesome Lands podcast, Lonesome Report. I forgot what even month it is. May
It's May 13th,
13th.
2025.
You should do the date. You always know what day it is. Go to lonesomelands.com if you want to support what we're doing. Click on subscribe. There's some ways to do that there. Click on store and buy a ball cap or a t-shirt. I've been shipping out all kinds of merch. So if you have placed an order, um, it's on the way. Everything's on the way. I'm caught up finally.
Wow.
Uh, yeah, I know.
And I'm behind.
Yeah, I had anyway. Yeah, you've been shipping out cattle. We could talk about that.
Trying.
But maybe we'll wait. I wanted to correct a couple things. Last week we talked a lot about JBS and how they're the biggest beef packer in the world. They have plans to go public on the New York Stock Exchange. A lot of people, have you seen a lot of people talk about that since? Kind of picked it up. I didn't see any. Well, AJ from the farm, he credited us. He was talking about it. He has a lot of Instagram people following him, but I saw a lot of other people talking about it. I feel like we got the
Yeah.
ball rolling. Did we? I didn't see anybody talking about it before us.
I don't know.
No, you don't think about that kind of stuff. You're
No, I
busy
don't.
loading cattle.
I'm just thinking about my business.
But a couple things we screwed up on that deal. I go back. Shad's like, "Oh, I didn't think we screwed anything up," but I go back and listen to these right after we get done. Secretary of Treasury is Scott Bessent, I believe. I think we said it was Gary Gensler who approved this deal. That is Biden's Secretary of Treasury. The new one, and it's the SEC that approved it. I don't know if it was necessarily the actual Secretary of Treasury. The other thing we screwed up, May 23rd, we said is the date they're going to be going public. I think at some point we said that on there. That is the shareholder meeting where they decide, their shareholders will decide if they're going to go public or not. And then if they do decide, they can go ahead and be listed on the New York Stock Exchange, I think sometime by before July, like in June,
Yeah.
like late June.
June to July. Yeah.
But was it you that said that there might be some pushback on that?
Yeah. So I heard yesterday from a friend of mine in the know that said the murmurings or the rumblings around Congress was that there might be a little bit of pushback on it.
Is there anything they can do? Could Congress stop a company
I
from
really
being?
don't know. I don't know how that works. I don't even know how it's interwoven into each other. But I mean, surely they have oversight of something there, or at least opinions.
We need to figure this stuff out before we come on here. Become more professional. We're flying by the seat of our pants a
We're
little bit.
ranchers. I'm a rancher.
Yeah, yeah. And who knows what I am. But anyway, I'm not a professional podcaster apparently. All right. So the JBS deal. And so when I was after the episode last week, um I typed in like who owned JBS before or who owned Swift. We did a whole thing about Swift packing and the history of it and everything. And I was like, who owned that before 2007? So I type in some stuff into Google and it didn't um nothing really came up, but one thing that came up that was really interesting, I thought, was a article from 2015, and I will have this in the comments or in the description, I promise. And it is from the National Provisioner, which is like a beef processing industry website, I guess, like a food website. And there was an article from 2015 called written by the Meat Man called the
Yeah.
U.S. Meatpacking Industry Investment Invasion. So 10 years ago, they were talking about how the U.S. has been invaded by foreign investments. Um, the subheadline is analyzing recent foreign investments made in the U.S. meatpacking industry. Um, and it's really interesting to read about where the thoughts were um, 10 years ago. In one part, he writes, the United States has been the world's largest recipient of foreign direct investment since 2006. Every day, foreign companies establish new operations in the United States, provide additional capital to establish businesses. Um, And when you think about that and how it's 10 years ago and how that has probably just increased over the whole
No doubt.
time. But in here they talk about one thing we didn't get into last week was um, like the pork and poultry. Like beef is hard enough to kind of figure things out with, but they said on July 2015. So this is all before JBS has been um, investigated for all of the bribes. If you didn't catch last week, JBS was pled guilty and convicted. The two owners were the Batista brothers. Were they pled guilty to bribing 1,800 politicians in Brazil, over $150 million. Three of the politicians were actually the presidents of Brazil, three consecutive presidents that they had set up accounts for. And this was all for them to be able to get money from a bank, a Brazilian bank that's ran by the government. So they're bribing the government so that they can get loans from the government and just buy whatever they really want to. Um, and now the reason we're talking about that now is because JBS is the largest beef packer and meat packer in the world, and they are fixing to go public on the New York Stock Exchange in the U.S.
If their board of directors approves it.
Yes. Okay. And so on July 1st of 2015, the big news in the pork industry was Cargill's sale of its entire swine and pork business to JBS USA. It was a well-kept secret. I haven't found anyone who knew anything was in the works. That is what I would expect from these two companies, which traditionally have played things close to the vest. JBS will pay 1.45 billion for all of
Billion.
Cargill's current pork business, including packing plants, feed mills, hog production facilities. Completion of the acquisition is subject to regulatory review and approval. So this was all in 2015, but it just goes to show like these beef packers that we always talk about, the four major beef packers, meat packers, I guess, but
Meat.
beef
Yeah,
packers,
exactly.
they control 85% of the beef processed in the US, and they have these these business relationships that go back decades now. And right now there's still three different lawsuits of collusion in the beef industry, where those they're not supposed to talk to each other or work things out in the market, and that is um, what's being what the heck word am I trying to think of? Alleged, I guess. Accused of. That's what they're being
Accused?
accused.
They have
Um,
been alleged of doing so.
yeah. And so, um, and yeah, and so when you look back and read this thing, but the most interesting, I'm gonna still maybe when I found this, I was like, I might get back to writing and write something for the website to kind of cover this. But the most interesting part is the last paragraph, and this being from 2015. He writes, this may look positive in the short term, but what about the long-term future of the industry and the family-owned producer? What about the industry family farm we want to leave our grandchildren? Will foreign investment lead to loss of control of our supply chain? Producers around the world are learning that without control of our supply chain, their futures are uncertain. At this point, the future is full of questions. So for now, I prefer to believe, as it currently states on the back of the US dollar, in God we trust. Um, but
Oh
really
man.
interesting going back to the what I always bring up on here. Last 5 years, we've lost 107,000 independent small cattle and beef, small cattle farms and ranches. 140,000 small farms in the U.S. have disappeared. That's in the last 5 years, and this article was written 10 years ago. So, really interesting stuff when you get down to it. And now we're kind of it's also interesting. We're getting into a time where you can go back and find this stuff.
I
10
know
years ago,
that
like
is
with the
pretty cool.
internet.
Yeah.
Because what
That
I
is pretty
looked up
cool.
too, I went to NCBA and tried to find their old press releases, like what was going on with them when this all was going on, and in there they don't have anything up like that old, or at least not like 2007 when JBS bought Swift or things like that. I was kind of looking up, but anyway. What do you think, Shad?
Well, the truth is the man had some vision because the question was at the very end is what's going to happen to small family farms and ranches. And we're absolutely seeing the fruit of that. Although at the time he wrote that, you could have argued that they had already infiltrated into the US economy and started this downward trend or downward spiral of family farms and ranches because of the centralization. You know, I feel like what's happening now is where it's only going to get worse. I don't have a lot of positivity to say about it because they have such a stronghold on I sometimes wonder does JBS and some of these big oligarchs a do they have leverage against those who call the shots in America? I think they do. Like, do they have leverage um, concerning the USDA?
For
Do they
sure.
have leverage over the DOJ? Do they have leverage? So I just don't know. It's all for me. A lot of times when I get into this, especially today, it's just a mess in my mind, and I think it's meant to be a mess. It's meant to create confusion. I mean, even that article was talking about confusion,
Well,
and
to get
so
back to it, like 2015 is also the same year that mandatory country of origin labeling was
that's
repealed.
right.
It must not have been before this article because I don't think they talk about it much in there. But I mean, you can't help but put we have this massive influx. That's what that article is describing in 2015. This massive influx of foreign investment in
Yep,
the exact same year we repeal the country of origin label on all beef.
yep.
Um,
And
I mean,
Congress did that.
that's not even a coincidence. Yeah, but also at the exact same time, the JBS was bribing politicians. I mean,
I
I don't know
think,
if I wasn't clear enough last time, but I think it is very. I mean, if you're putting two and two together, JBS is bribing politicians. They got everything they ever wanted. They come in here, they get M cool passed, they're
yep,
able to buy all these companies, um, and our politicians just go right along with it. It's pretty obvious that I mean, something needs to be looked into there. And our current Secretary of State Marco Rubio in 2018 thought something should be looked into, but of course U.S. politicians didn't want to. So that's just another red flag of the corruption that was going on at the time.
that's right.
But I think what you're getting at is I guess the big news is the cattle market. And I think a lot of people watch this and they're not really all that clued in with, there's a lot of non-ranching people that watch this. And so I guess more record prices in the cattle industry. They have closed the border officially, except for
Yes,
what's there right now, I guess, is going through or they're getting inspected thoroughly and then they're letting them through. But after that, then it's going to be completely closed for New World screwworm,
that's right.
and
For buffalo, bison, horses,
horses,
cattle.
pretty much nothing.
That's right.
Um, that can't swim across, ain't coming across. Um, but and so that's made the cattle market kind of shoot
Well, it
up.
did. It
Nothing.
sure did yesterday. That's for sure. And I knew when it came out on Sunday that that was an odd time for it to come out, and it came out just immediately. And I'm like, is there something more to this? Are they closer? According to the article, the New World screwworm has been detected within 700 miles of the U.S. border. Um, I would assume that the spread of that 700 miles probably isn't, if we take COVID, for example, 700 miles didn't mean anything. But I thought they come out with it really quickly and surprisingly because, we had closed the border earlier in the winter. And it was closed for what, a month, I think. And then they reopened it. And then, boom, here we are. I mean, just Sunday, boom, it's closed. And man, I knew the market was going to react, and it did. I mean, the fats, the feeders were up. I'm not sure how much the fats were up, over $2. I know that. And the feeders were up $4 to $6. And I was talking to some of my friends and these people that have their yearlings hedged for the fall. I was talking to one of them in Wyoming, and he's like, "Oh my gosh, this was yesterday." He says, "I'm going to have a $250,000 margin call today. If it goes up again tomorrow, which would have been today, but I had some big margin calls myself." So the the trend of upward continues, but I don't know where that's going to top out at. I would think that, we might go a little bit higher yet. I I guess my biggest question is, Jim, is how high can the cattle go where people producers stop buying them? Like we're talking 25 23 to $2,500 feeder cattle. I saw a deal today. I cannot remember where it was. A 240-pound baby calf bring $1,300. How
So by
many of those
itself,
can you? Yep, all by itself
that's probably
in a sale barn. In a sale barn.
so bottle
So,
calf.
well, it would turn into a bottle calf, I'm
Yeah.
sure.
So there's probably people you never know on them bottle calves. They could have a few
Well,
local people that
what you're seeing there though is, uh, accordingly, you get an animal, no matter what it weighs, but that one 240 pounds at the lowest price available on buying purchasing an animal. You see what I say?
yeah.
1,350,
Yeah,
where
that's your bottom.
a 500-pound steer calf is 2,000, $2,100, $2,200. So I guess that's the lens at which they look through. But who is going to buy these? I mean, buy these feeder cattle and put them on feed and risk that there's no long-term profit in them. I don't know. It's a wild deal. I continue to say that we're very dangerously close to a mass exodus because of the high prices, right? Because I think nobody's these generational ranches that don't have people coming back, they're gonna see this high sellout point and say, "Hey, my land's worth a ton, my cattle are worth a ton. Let's get rid of them." And then whoever comes in behind them to produce is going to be like, "I can't get in." I mean,
Hmm.
it's hard. You buy a 3,000, $3,800 uh, cow with a calf, and I've seen them up to. I saw one deal up to $6,000, and it's wild. It's a wild ride that I never thought I'd see in my lifetime.
Yeah, and it doesn't I know there's all this boy, this is great, kind of feeling, but it's awful. I mean, I think you always put it in more perspective because you're always worried about you're always like you said with your margin calls and it isn't always great for everybody.
Well, it's an access to capital issue, but we're getting to a point where the cattle, you're unable to. Back in the old days, when capital wasn't an issue, you could buy the calf. I did it a million times. You could buy those light calves, and we called it betting on the come, right? Buy them betting on the come. But with this kind of capital being expended out there, you can't buy these cattle betting on the come. You better have some way to insure or reach profitability in them. Set a bottom or hedge, to see some profitability in them before you buy them. It's just too much money. Too much money.
So, you talking about buying land. You said something about it. Do you want to talk about the Colorado deal?
If you want to talk about the Colorado deal, we can
Well,
sure
you
talk
can
about
try
it.
to explain it to me.
Well, let me explain it to you.
I'm going to
So
interrupt you because I'm going to get confused and then,
it's really not that confusing. So there's
okay.
been a ballot initiative presented in Colorado, purposely bypassing, the state legislature, And this ballot initiative is called the Colorado Wildlife and Biodiversity Protection Act. And it has been presented to the state committee. It has to be thoroughly
What
gone
is it?
through the committee. Slow down, bro.
Well,
Well, if
just
it
tell
was
me
to
what it
go through,
does.
listen, if it was to go through and get on the ballot, what it would do, if passed, would create a what they call the Colorado the Wildlife and Ecosystem Conservation Commission. Okay, WECC, and that commission would have total oversight of all wildlife and ecosystems in Colorado, no matter what. And if their main goal, let me get this out. Their main goal, their this is their purpose, right? Is to recognize that wildlife corridors are critical to ecological function, species survival, wildfire mitigation, and ensure habitat connectivity and ecosystem resilience. You and I have been talking a lot about
Their
wildlife
main goal
corridors.
is wildlife corridor. What did you say?
This is their purpose. It's not their goal, it's their purpose. Okay? Number 1, to create wildlife corridors. Number 2, to have control of keystone species. Number 3, to be able to list state endangered species listings. So they want to be able to control what is considered on to be on the state endangered species uh, list.
List.
List. And really, what the WECC, it would have no oversight. It's created by 9 members. The 9 members are selected by universities, by ENGOs, environmental non-governmental organizations, and policy institutes. And they would have, let me read this to you if I can find
So
it.
all the people we hate, which
Well,
means
it's all the
Nature
people we hate, but
Conservancy.
here's what's scary about it in the structure of it. They would have like 2 people on there from universities, 2 people on there from ENGOs, 1 person on there from a wildlife organization, 1 person on there selected in a lottery from the state voters, and 1 from somewhere else. But in the wording, it says that any member that creates income by agriculture, mining, energy, cannot be a part of this commission. So if you're a miner or a energy guy, an oil guy, or a
And so
farmer
it's
or
just like
rancher,
only environmental nuts.
that's
That's what they
pretty
say.
that's pretty much it. They're going to work in collaboration with public private partnerships. Here we go again with the Colorado Parks and Wildlife, the U.S. Forest Service, the Fish and Wildlife Service, and the Nature Conservancy. If the state or federal government dismantled any of those agencies, this commission would they would assume all of the statutory regulation and enforcement of that those agencies already assumed, right?
Yeah, and this is
And
important too for people to think about. Like a lot of times this environmental stuff and these kind of things are getting pushed into a certain state where they think they can do it,
yeah,
but it's the blueprint of what's going to come to your state.
they're bypassing your state legislature, and
Yeah.
they're using the ballot, and that's become,
Yeah,
a
Colorado is that's the other thing
weaponization.
about ballot initiatives.
But this commission, it would control the habitat benchmarks. We know that through sustainable development, it's all about continuous improvement, right? So once you get to a habitat benchmark that they say is okay, they'll use it and increase it, and you will be on the bottom again. They are going to create land use limitations. Um, the corridor
For private
networks.
land or
So they're saying this would only affect state and federal land. However, if you volunteer to put your land into a conservation easement or something connected with the federal government, that they also have that ability to go in and
So it is
dictate on
private
your
land.
land.
Yeah.
But here's one thing you got to think about. If they find out that the Preble's jumping mouse is endangered again and they put it on the state endangered species list, or let's say just the common prairie rattlesnake or the black-tailed prairie dog, which has already been on their endangered species list, if they find that on the or put that on the endangered species list and you have it on your ranch, in the wording of this, they can go in and limit use on your own on your private property. And what's different about this commission is that it's self-funded. So, like in Colorado, we have a brand board. That brand board is self-funded. We don't take any state money to run the brand board. It does itself. So this is gonna be the same way. It's not gonna take any state money. It's gonna be self-funded. Well, how are they gonna do that? Through fines and penalties and impact fees. So how are they gonna run a state agency, a pseudo state agency, through fines and penalties and impact fees? So they say if you get fined for breaking a rule, 20% of each fine would go into the WECC's yearly budget. Okay. 30% of each fine would go into land acquisition. So they're right up front. They're not lying about it. They want to partner with state agencies to buy more land. This is all about land acquisitions. I keep telling everybody it's all about land.
And
And they
that
want
is
to
the
use
worst thing in the whole. I mean,
it
we talk
is.
about it just so everybody ties it together. Land price is a huge reason why there's
That's
107,000
right.
less small farms and ranches in the U.S. in the last 5 years. Um, this federal money comes in there and it just screws up nothing has
Yeah.
anything to do with the market or
Nope.
profitability, or
Nope.
you can have $4,000 fat cattle, but if the Nature Conservancy and the federal government is bidding against each other for land, there's no way you're just not going to make a
Can't
profit.
compete with it. Ranchers and farmers
Yeah.
can't compete with it. And then they got impact fees. Well, what's an impact fee? Okay, so let's say they create this wildlife corridor. And on this corridor, your land is in a buffer zone. And you want to build a building, or you want to put a road in, or you want to put a fence in this buffer zone that they don't want you to be touching because it's near a wildlife corridor, right? So you have wildlife corridors, then you have buffer zones, and then you have your private property. Well, they're gonna, if you build, let's say you build a $1 million barn on your property and it's near a buffer zone, or you want it in the buffer zone, then they're going to come out and do on their terms an impact research study, right? And they're going to say, okay, so you're impacting it this percent or so much. Well, they're going to set these fees um, on you. So if you're what you're building, say your house is a million or your barn's $1 million, then they're going to charge you an impact fee of 0.5%. And that's more another way for them to make money and put in their coffers to buy land, the land that they want. And you know, as well as I do, everybody doesn't want much. They just want the guy's place next to him, right? So it
Hmm.
never stops. And the wording says that the fees are subject in relation to their version of ecological severity. Well, where's the benchmark for that? Who's the third party auditor for that, right? It's all about public-private partnerships, land acquisition, punishment, rewilding, wildlife corridors, and predatory animal introduction and reintroduction. All I know is this deal, if it's able to get on the ballot,
So they don't have the signatures yet?
no, they have to go out and get the signatures. It's just
But
been
that's the thing
proposed.
about you hear about the way they do that. They just
They will
make
get the
up
signatures.
stuff.
They will get the
Yeah, they just
signatures.
lie to people about what it's about.
Yeah.
They'll go to Whole Foods or whatever and stand outside and be like,
Yep.
"Do you want to destroy the environment? Okay, if you don't, then sign on right here." They have all these. It's so crazy how well they're funded too, and they just get people to do that. But
Well, and I mean, they just continue to be well funded. Now, last year we had on the ballot in Denver the no fur, and then the closing of the sheep processing plant. Both of those failed on the ballot in Denver. I would think that this would fail as well in Colorado if everybody gets to vote on it. But yeah, I don't
Well,
know.
you never
It's
know. You got to
well,
have some.
you
You got to
don't.
like the mountain lion deal. They got a lot of people, and the beef packing and all that. They got the information out there and were able to inform the public, and that's
Yeah.
why those things failed. But
Let me read this real quick. The WECC shall consist of 9 members. 3 independent ecologists appointed by accredited Colorado universities, 2 conservation biologists appointed by a nonpartisan environmental organization. Have you ever heard of a nonpartisan environmental organization? Never. 1 wildlife advocate selected by a citizen panel chosen by randomized lottery from eligible Colorado residents. Well, what makes a Colorado resident eligible? 1 indigenous representative appointed by tribal governments with historical ties to Colorado land. 1 environmental policy specialist appointed by a legal or policy institute. 1 wildlife management expert appointed by a federal or state wildlife agency. Now, here's what's crazy. No appointee may have any financial interest in extractive industries, including but not limited to mining, logging, commercial development, or agriculture.
yeah, that should.
So
Yeah,
that's what we're up against.
yeah. And they're
Um,
setting the blueprint, and I mean, this is obviously a plan.
this this commission will they have taken it upon themselves to they can designate state endangered species. They can conduct independent ecological impact assessments. They can require, even on you, mitigation for any project determined to harm endangered species or wildlife corridors. They can develop voluntary conservation programs for private landowners and businesses. And here's the crazy one. They will issue investigative subpoenas, inspect ecological sites, and refer cases for prosecution. Now, why that's crazy or not crazy is that we saw that with the U.S. Forest Service on
Hmm.
the mod case where they
Yeah,
selected
that's
themselves to prosecute American citizens, South Dakota citizens. So that's
yeah.
wild. We all need to be paying attention to that because it's not just a Colorado issue. It's a West issue, right? And it's an American issue that we have to be very, very careful with. And we've got to watch it. It's called the Colorado Wildlife and Biodiversity Protection Act.
So we're talking about land sales, and turns out in the middle of the night, we've talked a lot about this. And oh, and going back into corrections, Tim Sheehy, I believe is his name, out of Montana. He was on a podcast, and he I was listening to that, and he was talking about this. We had a whole episode, well, not a whole episode, but the headline of the episode was about U.S. selling off federal lands to create affordable housing or just building affordable housing on public land.
Yeah.
And he got on there, and he's a senator out of Montana. He took Tester's spot, I believe. Is that right? Pretty sure. Anyway, he was on there, and he talked about how there's a lot of like abandoned military bases, military properties, stuff that's close to cities, and he believes that that is what they were talking about when they're talking about um, building affordable housing. Almost kind of like stuff that has infrastructure or could easily have infrastructure, like already has power to it,
Well, yeah, like
close
for
to
example,
sewers, all that stuff.
yeah, for example, at Lahana, Colorado, on the south side of Lahana, Colorado, there is a former military housing unit that probably has, I don't know, 150, 200 houses for that are abandoned. I mean, I think the city finally got a hold of it and they're starting to, sell that. But there was a military base in southeast Colorado called Pinyon Canyon Maneuver Site, and they built that on the south side of La Junta, Colorado, in conjunction with this military site, and the military doesn't use it anymore. So maybe that's what they are referring to.
Yeah, and this goes right into what has been talked about last week, or I saw a few articles about it last week. They're the House was putting together their budget apparently at 11:30 at night. They came in. They decided they weren't going to sell off any public land in the budget. There wasn't going to be any public land sales. They came in. I think it was only Utah and Nevada. They said that they were going to allow public land sales for those states to go to the states um, in
Correct.
that budget, and it still has to go through the Senate and a number of different things. But they kind of snuck it in. People are mad about how they snuck it in, but I saw one of the people. I think it was this Jared Huffman, who's the California
Hmm.
guy who's trying to. Um, he's closing the dams, and we've done a lot of stuff with Keely Cavello about all the stupid things he's doing.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, you hear
All of a
about
sudden,
this.
he's all integral.
Yeah, yeah,
He's
I
like, we
know.
shouldn't be doing that
Well,
behind
that's the
closed
same
doors.
as yeah. Oh, they can't be doing this shady business to get their
Yeah,
part through, and then as soon
exactly.
as it switched, but yeah,
Oh,
they're all the same anyway. They'll sell anybody down the river to get what they want done or what their lobbyists want done. But but yeah, so that thing seems like it's if you want. So this is something. Are you still wanting to sell off all the public land? We when we first talked about this, you were like, sell it all.
I wasn't like sell it all, but
I thought,
I'm
don't
like,
make
let's
me go
sell it.
back
They
and
don't
find
need
the
to own
clip.
any. I mean, listen, we have to balance all this stuff out. And I don't know, we're not supposed to, the government's not supposed to own any land. I'm not saying sell it all. I'm
Mm,
saying we better balance it out. And I think it's a good idea to return some revenue back to the federal government. I mean,
the more I look at stuff, the more I am a public lands advocate for a number of reasons. But on this one, um, for those listening, Shad had the biggest eye roll you've ever seen in your life. Like I'm declaring myself a member of the
uh,
Bernie Sanders Club or something. But on this one, I think too, they said they wanted to turn some into housing. There is public, and I can see Nevada is like 98% or
yeah,
something federally owned land, and I believe Las Vegas and Reno are now pushing into this right up against the public lands,
yeah.
and they can't expand the cities, and so they have to be able to do something there. And that kind of stuff, like I get, I think there's probably more to it because that's the one thing when I heard about this, I was like, oh, they're going to sell off all their federal land, but then it said that in the budget or like in the bill, it said possibly tens of thousands and possibly up to 100,000 acres, and I'm like, oh, that's when you're talking about Nevada and Utah, that's kind of not too much. They might be going crazy. But the reason
Well,
why I'm talking about why I'm definitely for not selling off public lands is because all of the stuff we went into in the last few weeks, which goes into
what's that?
just this week, I was sent, there was something on Twitter. I think he tagged you in it too. World Wildlife Fund. We're going to save the Black Hills billboard right outside Rapid City. So now we have Holdfast Collective, Nature Conservancy, and World Wildlife Fund, all very concerned with Western South Dakota. And that's where I mean, we already talked about it. When you put these federal lands up to sale, there ain't gonna be ranchers sitting around buying it.
No, you're
It's gonna
right.
be Nature Conservancy and World Wildlife Fund and Ted Turner and
Yeah,
all of those kind of people,
that's right.
you
I
know.
will agree with you that
And
on
so
that.
that would be my biggest fear. I think the public lands, the way they are and the way they set up these grazing contracts and everything. It works good for the guys on them, and it provides an income for small family ranches. And so that is where you know, and that would be gone if it goes to those companies. Um, so that's my perspective on that deal.
Well, that's a great perspective, sir.
No, see, take your eye roll back, take it back,
I'm trying.
roll it back the other way.
It is a great perspective on that, and I will tell you that, gosh, dang, talk about which is the dirtiest shirt in the hamper, the federal government or the NGOs, right?
Well, they're both. two wings of the same bird, right?
That's
As they
right.
say. I mean, it's
You're
kind of like they
that
both
that's
are working
right.
together.
That's right.
I will say I felt a little, that was a, I don't know. Was that a goofy thing to say? Advocate for public land? That didn't feel right coming out either. I didn't,
Well,
that made me feel a
but
little,
you are. I mean, you're like, we need to save this pristine land.
I didn't say that.
And
I
yeah, you
just
did
explained.
earlier in the year. You did. You did. And I'm not against that. I'm not against it, but I
Well, I
am.
do think, you know, I don't know. There's so much crap out there. Like Trump wants to drill oil in Yellowstone. Like I don't. I mean, I think the truth lies in the middle somewhere.
Agree. That we can agree on.
And everybody wants to. I mean, the thing that jumps to my mind is like the people who were sticking up for the mods were like, oh, they busted into the place with this tactical gear. They wanted to make it sound like a SWAT team came in, and it's like, okay, that's not how it happened. And by saying that, you're just destroying your own credibility and the credibility of the other people that support those people. That's my thought. What
I
else you
get it.
got? Lonesome History. Are you ready for Lonesome History segment?
Yes, sir, I am.
Brought to you by lonesomelands.com. Click on subscribe, buy merch, all that stuff. If you want us to keep doing this deal, which after this week you might not want us to. um, so this is Vaquero of the Brush Country. I think I've read something out of this before, but I wanted to because last time we talked about something so recently, which is the JBS stuff. That was the history. Um, Last time, did we talk about JBS stuff as history? I can't remember, but I thought I would go all the way back to the first cattle industry, the first beef industry. It wasn't even a beef industry when the cattle industry started. There was so many cattle in South Texas, they were kind of worthless. And they were mainly sold for hide and tallow because we didn't have oil back then. So they used their tallow for grease. You're looking at me like I'm crazy.
No,
Have you heard of this? The hide and tallow trade?
I've read about it.
Yeah. And there was hide thieves. They'd kill cattle and just take their hides, leave them. Um and that's described in this book, but I couldn't find the part where it was. So, but I did come across kind of just the original kind of this guy. This is J. Frank Dovey, but John D. Young was he's just kind of giving his experiences, which started way probably 1860s around that time in South Texas. And he says one of these old steers, so he's talking about the very first longhorns that they would catch. One of these old steers headed out of the herd for the brush. He was ready to hook the liver out of anything that got in front of him. The horns were not for ornament. Oftener than otherwise, it did no good to rope such a steer, as he would start fighting as soon as he felt the rope tighten. Then, if he was thrown down, he was likely to sulk and refuse to get up. A vaquero might twist the tail of such a sulky animal until it broke, might kick and spur the hide off of his backbone, might rub sand in his eyes, and still the steer would refuse to budge. If he got too hot, he might die right where he lay. Finally, if he did get up, he would be so on the prod that nothing could come close enough to touch him with a 40-foot pole. While a hand was fooling with one such steer, a dozen others would get away. And now he talks about, have you ever heard tailing them down? Have you ever seen that?
Yeah.
Will you act like there's a lot of people that haven't heard of tailing them down.
Well, what are you talking about? Everybody knows what that is.
I don't think you know what I'm talking about. So, like the Razorback, the Longhorn had a long, limber tail. It was well proportioned to his horns and legs. The safest and most effective thing to do when an old steer ran off was to tail him. You know what I'm talking about now? I'm not talking about tailing him down in a branding pen with them healed.
I know.
Okay. A thorough tailing usually knocked the breath out of him, and so dazed him that he would be good the rest of the day. Tailing required first a swift horse that could turn on a
Yep.
dime and knew his business. It required secondly a quick and daring rider who could grab a cow's tail on a dead run, deftly twist it around the horn of his saddle, and then spurt a little to one side and a head so as to give the cow a brute flat bust. There was a way of tailing an animal so that its neck will pop in two. Old time cowhands with a bad temper or a distorted sense of humor or a craving for fresh meat sometimes broke an animal's neck in this way accidentally on purpose. Cattle owners, however, would not stand for neck breaking. Really, with a fast horse and a certain sleight that comes from practice, it is very easy to tail an animal down, even when busted gently. If the word gently can ever be applied to such a process, a grown animal is almost sure to be somewhat bruised. Have you seen it? They still do it, I think, in Mexico, like
They
with
do it in
littler calves.
Mexico.
But I've seen
In
it. I've never seen them wrap around their horn. I've seen them wrap around their foot.
they're it's all about timing,
Oh,
speed and timing,
if
speed
you're
and
not
timing.
watching, you missed out on Shad's. I guess you heard the sound effects, but you know what I'm saying. So they'd ride up along them and they hook. They'd wrap their tail around their foot and then they'd jerk away and it would yank them sideways. Um. Okay. Did I read this before about when they shot him through the horns?
No.
That cow. Okay, so there's another part where he talks about getting a hold of these. That cow hunt was no place for members of the Humane Society. Nothing in the way of kindness would work on those old mossy horns. One way of subduing them was to shoot them through the horns. If a steer went to fighting, it was common practice to run by him, shooting at the thick part of his horn with a six shooter. If the horn was if the horn was hit center, the pain of the jar calmed the steer and very promptly, and he became manageable. If the pith of the horn was punctured, the soreness kept the steer on his behavior for weeks. Sometimes a glancing shot on the horn caused a bullet to curve and come whistling back towards the man who shot it. Occasionally a missed shot killed a steer. Cattle were cheap and it was an advantage to get rid of these outlaws at any price. They spoiled the other cattle. They had to be either shot or driven off. Did you ever heard of that? Shooting them in the horn to get for their hides and tallow. There it is. I didn't mark any of the pages there.
You have to be a pretty dang good shot.
No kidding. On a full, at a full run.
It's
Uh,
amazing what will humble an animal or a cow, a
like a
beef.
bullet through the horn.
Yeah, that'll humble him.
Okay, so there was one man in our outfit that I recall most often and most vividly was Sam, the black cook. He always had a cheerful word or cheerful song, and he seemed to have an affection for every one of us. When we camped in the vicinity of brush, every cowboy before coming in would rope a chunk of wood and snake it up to the chuck wagon. That would always make Sam grin and happy whether he needed it or not. He was about 35 years old, black as a crow, and weighed around 225 pounds. As he had been raised on a ranch, he was a good rider, and frequently one of the boys would get him to top off, which means ride first, meaning a horse who hadn't been ridden. He would ride him first on a bad horse. One day, a cowboy remarked that Sam was too big and strong for a man, but not big enough for a horse. At that, Sam said he was a horse and that he would give $1 to any man in the outfit who could ride him without spurs. That evening, we camped in a sandy place, and Sam announced that he was ready to play horse if any man thought he could ride. It was agreed that I should win the first dollar. Sam stripped stark naked, wearing only a bandana around his neck for the rider to hold on to. I really did not have much confidence in my ability to stay on him, for as a boy I had often been thrown by, uh, I would say, slaves. He uses different terminology, but who took me on their backs. Nevertheless, I pulled off my boots and mounted. Sam started out by jumping straight ahead until he judged that I had accommodated myself to that rhythm. Then he suddenly stopped short and whirled back. I kept straight on, landing on my head. After that, every fellow in the crowd had to show off his ability at riding, and every one of them tumbled. I had to mark out a couple. I had to,
A little
it's not quite as politically correct as
colorful language.
yeah. But anyway, they
Have you
rode the
ever
cook. They rode the cook on that outfit. So talk about what you're doing.
I'm shipping a lot of cattle to the north off of our Texas country, wheat country, It's nothing unusual. A lot of people do it. That is kind of a complicated job because we have them all over on our fields, and on grass here. And some of it's not contiguous. And then, so we have to bring them in. We give them another shot. We give them, we deworm them, dehorn them, give them a multi-min shot, and then we put them on trucks and we go north with them. And then they get out there where it's cool and beautiful and the grass is green, 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 and they grow. It's pretty
All
fun.
right.
I've been at it a long time, man. This is my 32nd year, same job.
Hmm.
And, me and my sister do a lot of this together. Well, we do it all together.
And you got another one up in Colorado receiving,
My
right?
What's pretty cool about that deal is my mom is 77 years old. She turned 77 this week, and she's had a few wrecks in her life.
Happy
You need,
birthday, matriarch.
yeah,
Happy
happy
birthday to the
birthday.
matriarch.
That's right. So her and then my oldest sister, who was a school marm, never got married, taught school, coached basketball. She retired from teaching, moved back up there to help me take care of my mom. And so those two, I send all those cattle to them. Just this morning, they got 2 loads of cattle and they already got them to grass. I bought them each a side by side because everybody's too old to ride. And my mom's been through enough wrecks. She don't need to be on a horse. And really, Christy too. And so they move them. I mean, like one set 9 miles on side by sides. They do a good job for us. It's
Hmm.
pretty good. I'm proud of them.
Yeah, well, they probably appreciate you not being up there. I read your Mother's Day. Your Mother's Day. Yeah, if you haven't read yet, it's on Facebook. Maybe I'll post. Well, I don't know if I'll get that up, but go to Facebook and Lonesome Land's account. Read about how dumb Shad is.
What are you talking about?
Roping that
Dumb.
calf
There wasn't very many people who could rope a calf. I've roped a lot of cattle in my life on the prairie. I was just telling my
out the
son
back of a pickup and then dallying to the.
I did
What'd you
it.
dally to?
Well, normally when I would have
Yeah,
done
but
that, I would have dallied to the fifth wheel in the bed of the
right.
pickup. That was a
But
brand
there
new
was
pickup.
a bumper hitch.
There was a bumper hitch on it. It was a brand new pickup. We hadn't put the fifth wheel in it yet. And that I somehow I told her stay up with it and then stop. And once she stopped, I got down there. I don't know. I must have been limber back in the day, but I did jump down there and get that dallied up. And I got that heifer up against that pickup, and I thought I was pretty safe until I wasn't very safe. And what's funny about that whole deal is I remember, my mom's handled a lot of cattle, and I had that heifer's head tight to the pickup, so she really could only move her body. But my mom kind of knew how to get in there, and she put her arm and she had a syringe full of medicine in her left arm, and she kind of ran it down her shoulder to get her used to it. And when that needle hit that heifer, she jumped. Well, I thought I had her, but I didn't have her, and she got enough loose enough in there, that she got that rope off off of that ball and around that hitch. My mom went to the ground the first time, and that heifer acted like she never even seen my mom. She came straight at me, which I was out on the prairie 30 feet away, right? And she came straight at me. Well, the pickup was over here, and I thought I got to get to that pickup because there's nothing, nowhere I can go. So I just, as that heifer come by me, I bypassed her head and got to the pickup, and that window was down in that pickup. That heifer turned on me, and of course I had that rope tied around my hip, and I jumped head first into that passenger side, and it had bucket seats in it and a console, and I hit my head on that console, and I remember feeling that heifer's nostrils kind of in my hiney. She had jumped with me into that pickup, and
Did it tear the
then it was
pickup
just
up?
Yeah, it dented that brand new pickup,
Did you
scratched.
tear up the tailgate when you had her pushed
No,
up against?
no, no. It just, she got her slobbers on it, but everything was quiet for like a split second. And then, then I heard my mom go, Shad. And I kind of got up and I looked out the driver's side door. And right, and that heifer had gone around that pickup. And my mom was hit. Why was my mom running out away from the pickup into the prairie? But she, as soon as that heifer hit her, I mean, that heifer was on her hiney. And as soon as she barely made contact, my mom tripped and fell in a badger hole. There was a big old badger hole there, probably, 10 inches. And her head goes down into that hole, and that heifer did stomp on her. Oh my gosh, I felt terrible about it. And so the rope had come off, and I went over there, and I was thought she was hurt bad. And I'll never forget. I said, Mom, are you okay? Nothing. Thought she was knocked out, which I don't know, maybe she was a little bit. And pretty quick, I heard her go, Shad, Shad, help me up. And one arm kind of pops up, and the other arm pops up. And I thought she was an old lady then, but she was only 50 years old. And she got up, and I mean, she had blood running down her face, on her arms. Her hair was a mess. It had dirt and sand and sage in it. I mean, it looked like she rolled on the prairie for 10 days. And I thought, well, I better get her to the hospital. So I got her in the pickup very slowly. And she was kind of goofy. And I said, are you all right? And she goes, no. And when my mom says she ain't all right, she's not all right. She's tough. And I said, well, do we need to call the helicopter, or do I need to take you to the ER? Colorado Springs is about 40 miles away. And she goes, you better take me to the ER. So I went up through the prairie. We was about a mile south of the gate, and bumped around, and she was kind of coming to. And when we got up to the gate, I jokingly, but not jokingly, said, hey, can you get the gate? And she looked at me. When she turned her head and looked at me, the dirt was coming, and she was hot, so she was sweating. Well, all that dirt and blood and sweat was coming down her face, and she chipped her tooth real bad. And she looked at me, and I thought, shouldn't have asked that. And she just burst out laughing. I mean, just as hard as she could laugh. And she got to laughing so hard, I thought, well, she ain't right. It was funny, but she ain't right. And she went ahead and got the gate. And I said, you want to go to the doctor? And she goes, no, let's turn around and get these cattle put out. So we never did go to the doctor that day. It's pretty funny though. I look
Yeah.
back on that and I just laugh. I mean, I can just remember lifting my head up, looking out that window, and as soon as I did, her head went in that hole, and that heifer was all over her. But I did get my rope back. I went back the next morning with my horse, which I should have had my horse anyway, and I that heifer was pretty sore. She had a big old case of foot rot, and I loped my horse around, in circle till I could get up against her head and jerk my rope off. Well, I actually just dallied it up and tripped her, and tied her down and doctored her. She was fine. But yeah,
Unlike your mother. I read that story and all I could think was like, Shad, you're such an idiot.
I got to give my own mom props though.
Yeah. Happy
She
birthday. What's her name? I should know her
Linda,
name, I feel it. Linda.
Linda Sullivan, Linda
Happy birthday,
Sullivan.
Linda Sullivan.
Yeah, she's
Putting
been a
up with
lot of
that.
help.
Putting
She's
up
been a
with
lot of help for my dad and our family. If you knew how many, if she had $10 for every meal that she put out of her kitchen for cowboys, we wouldn't need to have any other income. I promise you that.
Hmm. Feel like we should have. This should have been Linda Sullivan birthday episode.
Well, she watches every episode, so she's probably going to kill me, but
Well, it's all. You didn't say anything different than what's written on Facebook that
no, it was
hundreds
a
of
good
people have seen.
story. I'm telling you, Jim, she's the last of a dying breed, and I've got to write a book about her because there wasn't nothing she would not help us do. Like, I mean, she was outside, she was inside. She helped me and Kelly pull a jillion windmills and replace the leathers and I don't ever remember climbing up on top of the windmill and oiling one, but she'd dang sure be there. She'd help you underneath and you know, fix fence with you, process cattle, move cattle, make sure you had lunch. I mean, she is the last of a dying breed.
Yes, sir. All righty. LonesomeLands.com. Click subscribe. See you next week.
Adios.